steadily it rises. Public preference for Lincoln Continental as the symbol for today's luxury motoring.
Hey, it's Jason ODB, the Lincoln Addict, and I need to put the pedal down this week and try to recap and finish the next few cars. Barrett Jackson Scottsdale was back in January, and obviously just trying to get through all of these cars and not trying to do too many at one time or 1 week, so to speak, but certainly appreciate everyone that has continued to come back and support the channel. Really, really appreciate it. So what we want to look at next is we started at the lowest and we are climbing up to the highest sale. If you look on the screen, you see $200,200. Nice round number, kind of, right? 200. This 61 Lincoln Continental Convertible custom semi-resto mod, I guess you could call it. It sold for over $200,000. Now, of course, that is with as I always say, that is with the buyer fee. And the reason for that is because that's the price that Barrett Jackson posts on their website. So we'll look at it in a moment. Now, this is copy and pasted from the website. There's not a lot of photos. I did mention this car leading up to Barrett Jackson Scottsdale on some of the cars that we knew that were going to cross the block. Justin Carrillo, he's actually in the truck and car club that I'm in, which is Sever Ties. I've been in since the late 90s, and it was formed 30 years ago in 92. But Justin and I got a chance to meet him at SEMA in the past, and he is no stranger to building cars and, of course, selling them. This is a very, very big thing for a lot of people out there. They'll build a car, take it to auction, hopefully make some money, build more cars, more vehicles, so on and so forth. But this 61 Lincoln Continental Convertible, I get, is not going to be for everyone. Certainly, anytime you start lowering and doing things like that, I understand there's going to be a portion of people that are like, hey, I'm out. It's not my thing. Totally get it. But if you're a return viewer of the channel or you're new, you'll probably appreciate some of the other information that I'll add in to these reviews, if you will. Now, just like any hot rod that's been built over the course of time, a big thing in the car world is naming your vehicle, right? And this is something that's been going on a very long time. In this case, it was named Mr. Oswald, and that's just the name that he gave to this car. This is a triple black convertible. Under 3,000 were made for the convertibles in the 61 year. So I've kind of covered some of that in the past, talking about production numbers and whatnot. 61 arguably is many people's favorite year. You can see the front end, very kind of Thunderbird-ish is what you'll often hear. And it's a 61 that they just love the design, right? The car has been upgraded from its original form to a modern day cruiser. So how has that been done? Well, number one, apparently the body was totally straight and received new paint. So fantastic. And we're assuming it received new paint. It says it's been upgraded from its original form to a modern day cruiser because the body is straight and evidence of the care and attention. So I didn't see it in person, but I'm assuming it has been reshot at some point. It has a 430, so it says it's been rebuilt. So that's fantastic. Rebuilding an engine, people that do this every single day, is not a difficult thing, right? But, having a car and taking the engine out or trusting in someone to do all that, it can be a big thing. So, that's often something that people are appreciative of if something's been rebuilt, because they realize it's not just a car that has lipstick on it. You're trying to run it through the block. Someone's taken some time to go through and refresh the car, and that's what was done here. It does have an electric fan. It says the car is equipped with disc brake conversion, Slam specialty airbags. They've been around a long time. Chop and Block, which is one of the couple of companies that make a kit for it, including Devious Customs. But Chop and Block is a different brand than Devious. Has shocks on all four corners, as you would imagine. And oftentimes, a guy like me that's into air suspension, you'll often hear people say, it has a better ride than stock. Maybe on worn-out suspension, okay? My car rides fantastic, I'll be totally honest. But I'll tell you, many of you, if you've ever ridden in a convertible or just a regular sedan, 60s Lincoln, if it has newer shocks and, it's been refurbished a little bit, or it's very low miles. The cars ride great from the factory as well, but you'll often see that. We'll kind of just give the disclaimer, man, it rides better than stock. That's, of course, to be discussed, right, amongst us car people. The car, of course, lays flat on the ground because of the air suspension 22-inch wheels. I believe they're US mags. There's a local guy here in the Tampa Bay area who I've met, and he has the same set of wheels, I believe. The top has been restored by John Cashman. So John has since retired, but of course that was back a couple of years ago. So we will see evidence of this, that John did the upgrade or refreshing, I guess you could call it, of the convertible top, which, as many of you know, if you're going to buy one of these cars, it's fantastic if somebody like John has went through it. New lines, new, everything new is definitely the way to go, because remember, these cars are 60 plus years old now, right? So 61 in 2011 was 50 years old, right? So 2022 was 60 years old, and now we're in 2023. So it's almost 60 and a half years old, which is insane. Well, 65, whatever. The original owner's manual is included as well. Now, what I want to do is I want to jump over to the actual listing. So we can see here 200,200, and let's take a look at some of the photos. So here you have the front three-quarter shot, which you saw in my little presentation there. In 61, as I've said in the past, you have 61 and early 62s, you have the key hole cover that it has a little notch in it, and you can put your fingernail there, or I guess you could put the key, but most people, I think, put their fingernail and they pull it back and then they put the key in. Not that you're really going to be locking the car, but depending on your situation, right? If this is always at your house and you're cruising it, you're probably not going to deal with it much. But on the outside, you can see it does have the little keyhole cover there, and that's something that's kind of distinguished on the early 60s, in this case 61. The front end is very distinguishable. You can easily tell a 61 from a 62 just by the front end. Boom. So if you're new to these cars, or you've come to the channel because you're like, hey, I like these cars, go back and watch some of the older videos. I'll talk a lot about that. What I try to do is just pass along things I've learned or things that I appreciate about these cars. And again, seeing this, you'll become an expert pretty quick on, hey, is it a 61 or 62? From the side, they're a little bit tougher. If this was a side shot only, it's a little tougher to tell apart. But of course, front three-quarter, boom, we can see front end, dead giveaway, or a tell, as some people will say. The tell on this car that it's a 61 is the front end. It's just distinguishable. It's totally different than 62. We can see, of course, it does have the custom wheels. Again, not everybody's cup of tea. And the thing that I would say about this car too is when you look at the stance of it, to put a 22-inch wheel on this, it's not often talked about. My friend that's been building chassis and doing, air suspension work and stuff like that for 25 plus years, he can do this stuff like basically with almost like a blindfold on. When you look at this car, you'll see it's these cars can go lower, basically, if you really want them to. But the reason why I say that is this car has a great stance for, I think, a lot of people that are going to be able to get in, turn on the key, and drive this car and have a good time. And that's the cool thing about these Lincolns, that you can airbag them and not like kind of chop them up or get into cutting or anything like that. You could pretty much bolt on a kit with sometimes minimal welding, and you'll have a car this low. Okay. So again, to me, I look at it and say, I like the stance of it. I think Justin and his team, they know definitely what they're doing, and the people that he works with. This car is, again, one that, I guess, hypothetically, if you didn't want it airbagged, you could take all the stuff off. But certainly the point that I'm making here is that these cars can go pretty dang low. This one's pretty low, but it's also at a stance where I think, it's going to appeal to more people, is what I'm getting at. So there's that. We can see a rear 3/4 shot, and again with a 22-inch wheel, with where the body sits on this. Again, I think it's fantastic. It tucks a lot of wheel, so you'll often hear that term in kind of the hot rod world. The air suspension stuff was really driven out of the mini truck world, believe it or not. And I remember in the 90s, the hot rod guys not even wanting us to come to their events because it's like, oh, these guys have hydraulics and airbags and all that. And when the shock waves and some of these different air suspension components started becoming bigger in the late 90s, early 2000s, then the hot rodders really started picking up on air suspension. You can't go to SEMA now without seeing stuff like this laid out. It's cool. And by the way, when you raise it up, like in my 64, as an example, I'm only 2 inches lower than stock where I have the drive height at. So when I went to local shows and I don't air out my car, would be the same thing with this. People won't even know that it's airbagged. Now, they can kind of draw some conclusions to go, hey, they've got custom wheels. I see a little controller there to control the air suspension. Certainly. But just know that the stance of this car is going to allow for someone to take it to a show and air it out like this and have a good time, or cruise it down the boulevard, or take it to a hot rod show if they don't want to air it out, and they'll still have a good time with it. Now, what we can see here is, I think, this bumper, and you can see they're a little bit close up to where the taillight setup is. This is something that, you guys have seen I've called out in the past. This isn't like a deal breaker or anything like that. These can easily be adjusted if need be. They are sometimes a pain to get the right gapping and things like that. I know I pulled my hair out trying to do it on my personal cars, but it's just something, again, with this channel, I like to kind of point out what I'm looking at. You can see the keyhole cover here as well. Again, with a triple black car, black is not an easy color to maintain. So anytime if something's been resprayed or if something's just been cared for, you can easily see imperfections in black paint. And this car, certainly from where it sits here, looks fantastic. What we can see here on the engine bay, so we know that it's a 430, which is the MEL, stands for Mercury Etzel Lincoln, and this engine bay looks super clean. Now, oftentimes when people are going to auction, they're going to have someone detail it. They're going to spend the time, and I love that. Nothing in here looks hidden. Nothing in here looks like they just took a spray can and just started spraying stuff. It all looks nicely done and clean. A couple things to point out. Number one, it doesn't have AC. It's a non-AC car, okay? Not a deal breaker for most. If you have followed the channel, you know that I always mention Haggerty with their price guide. Since I'm a Haggerty customer, I can log in and see that. Typically, the value of one of these cars is elevated by 10% or so if it has AC. So for some people, depending on where you live in the country or in the world, you're not going to care if it has AC. Now, I can tell you in Florida, my AC, I don't have it working on my 64 or my 65. I'm partially upgraded on my 65. It's nice to have that cool air blowing on you. Don't get me wrong, but when the top is down and it's sweltering out, it's still going to be hot. So that's why a lot of people, I don't think that they really care if they have air conditioning. You can always add in an aftermarket AC if you really wanted to. Vintage Air and companies like that certainly offer stuff out there. Something else to keep in mind is with a non-AC, it's not going to have a clutch fan. So that's why you see a little bit different setup here. And that's the reason. You also have a 2-port. So I've talked about this in the past. Now, I have said, yes, I'm of the notion if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I get it, right? But if you ask John Cashman, if you ask Chris Dunn, who owns Lincoln Land, and some of the people that have been around these cars forever, or you go into the lincolnforum.net, which is where I spend time, even though it's kind of slowed down with content, but I spend time in there. Not as many people posting, I guess is what you could say. Everybody will tell you it's best to have a 3-port, and you can get one for, I don't know, $150 to $300, depending on if it's rebuilt. And I don't want to go into the whole and beat a dead horse because I always talk about it. But certainly, typically when I see a 2-port, just 1, 2, you could just buy another one. You could put the 3-port on there. The cars will tend to run better, especially in very hot climates. My car had one, and I took it off pretty soon after. and got a 3-port, and Tony or Blair rebuilt it, and boom, knock on wood, it's been good ever since. Now, the other thing I see here is I do believe this looks like the stock master cylinder. So I've talked at lengths about why you would want to upgrade to the dual master cylinder. It's kind of hard to tell in this photo. I do believe this looks like a stock one. So again, you're going to sometimes, and this is no slight against, the guys that built this car, you're often, especially if something's going to go to auction, they've spent some time having the motor rebuilt, having done some things. If it was me and I got this car and let's say some of the brake components have been upgraded, certainly this may be something you want to do, which is put a dual reservoir, also put a proportioning valve if there's not already one there. I assume they put a proportioning valve on. I'll talk more about this in the future because my 65, the gentleman that I had bought it from, Robert, he had done some work, and I think the previous owners was a U.S. Congresswoman and her husband. They had done some work to it, and it's just a really nice upgrade. There's companies like CPP out there that you can get the parts from, so I would call that out. Now, I do believe this is speed control. Off the top of my head, I haven't seen a lot of the speed controls. It is an option, and sometimes you'll see them in a car where it's been removed, but they'll still have the control on the dash kind of for the looks. But I do believe, going from memory, that this is the speed control, which it was an option. So what is speed control? That, of course, is like what we refer to now as cruise control. You can see over here the horns were on the passenger apron. You can also see that there is a stereo wire here, so presumably going back, you're going to have your bigger wire ran all the way to the back for any stereo or the compressors or the air suspension, brain and things like that. It's all going to kind of more than likely tap in up here. So again, this stuff can be hidden if you wanted to, but for the most part, it looks cleaner than we've seen on other stuff that I've reviewed. Here you can see kind of the basic black interior, more than likely been redone, whether it's vinyl or leather. I'm guessing vinyl, but I could be wrong. Again, doesn't look bad. I think this is great that if you want to get in and just drive the car, and then down the road, if you want to upgrade it, certainly what you see here is what you get. I always like to look here to see, are the caps here? Those caps are getting more expensive, right? And I always, want to make sure that if I'm looking at a car, that it's got all those little pieces, and that's kind of where my eye goes first. Again, I like to show you guys what I'm looking at, in case you're ever looking to buy one of these cars. Here you can see the side shot. So again, they're a little tougher to tell apart, especially 61, 2, and 3 from the side. The easiest way to tell the 1s and 2s from the 3s is the antenna. As I've always said, in 61 and 62, it is back here on the driver's peak molding. So these little moldings here are often referred to as peak moldings. And it's right here. You can see the antenna on 63. It was moved up here. So if we were looking at this from the side, we could easily tell it's a 61 or 62 because of the antenna, but also 61 in early 62s, maybe 3, 4, 5 months. I've heard some of you guys even chime in on, hey, I got a 62 that was built in June of 60, whatever year, right? Then, you guys have chimed in before, and my understanding is that this keyhole cover, again, was kind of the earlier models that were made for 62 until they ran out. So, yeah, there you go. There's a couple little ways to tell from the side. Here we can see the speedometer, and this looks like, again, someone detailed that I've talked about in the past, and I need to do a video on this. There's almost like a film that will, it's from the factory, and it over the course of time, it yellows. And you can get in here with the quadruple zero. So you go to your local hardware store, you look for the 4-0 steel wool, and you look for like a Brasso type polish. And you can take this pod out, these actual 3 pods, and you can make all this look fantastic. And this actually looks really, really good. It looks like someone did detail it. Certainly they may have taken these pods out when they were kind of building this car, so to speak. And this looks really good. But it could definitely be a fun kind of weekend project if you're looking to spice up your interior. But what we see here looks nice. We do see the factory radio. I believe oftentimes you're going to see this looks like it's painted, which you'll see from time to time. But I appreciate, and especially in the 1s, 2s, 3s, I guess 4s and 5s as well, when the factory radio is just left here. I did a review of a 61 that was Chris Dunn's, still owns it, and I talked a little bit about some of these colors here as it relates to, if you look back here, these little inserts, the wood inserts. I'm guessing these aren't factory back here, or maybe they have been painted. But certainly the ones, if you look back at the 61 video I did a Chris Dunn sedan, I talk a little bit about that and how many pieces there are. But certainly to me, if I had one of these cars, even if you wanted a CD player, or by today's standards, CD players are almost outdated, you will sometimes see them under the dash, in the glove box. But really all you need is like what I have now for my 64. You just have a little Bluetooth deal that plugs in your amp, and your phone connects right to it. You don't even need a head unit, depending on your situation. But I love when the factory radio is left here, because it just, when someone walks up to the car, especially the owner, you don't want to look in here and see like some 1999 radio. It just kind of looks a little weird. Again, front end, very distinctive for 61. Trust me, I'll do a video in the future talking more about that. But, 61, 62, totally different. Here we can see the John Cashman signature. So this will certainly add value to the car. John worked on these cars for a long time. If you're new to the channel, you can check out John Cashman. I had him on the podcast, Lincoln Addict podcast. He's a friend, someone I call a friend, and he was also on Jay Leno's Garage. He worked on Jay's 66. John sold his business convertible Lincolns, and this signature here is proof that John worked on it. Of course, 217. I don't know what year John started doing this, but certainly he realized when he was going to these homes throughout the country to work on these cars, these folks were spending a few $1,000s, right, to have him fix the windows and go through the top and do an upgrade, often in one day, sometimes a day and a half. So by adding this signature under the deck lid, it brings, awareness that, hey, John worked on it. John was the man. He knew his stuff, and certainly adding some value there. And then we're back to the front 3/4 shot, rear 3/4 shot. So what I would say about this car is, here's a few good things, really good stuff about it. It's semi-resto mod, right? Stock engine, rebuilt. What we can see is paint looks good, wheels aftermarket, air suspension. 200,000. I'm happy for Justin. I'm happy that these cars are continuing to bring some money. It's black, it's airbagged, it's got custom wheels. That stuff is a recipe for what people want. As much as I love colors that aren't black, everybody wants a black Lincoln. It seems like a lot of people that are just like, quote, this is my dream car. So, hey, I'm happy for Justin. I think the team did great on this one. There's probably a couple things that maybe I'm missing or not going down the bunny trail. What I would like to see from Barrett Jackson is I would like to see them add more photos. I hope that as time goes on, they'll do that. Again, I know most of their clients are on site. I do also think that adding more photos like inside the trunk, show us what the air suspension looks like, right? The components and things like that. Justin and his team, they do great work. Certainly, I don't know if they submit 20 photos and if Barrett Jackson just goes, hey, I want to put these 5 or 10. Don't know how necessarily that works, but I certainly do think that adding more photos or showing the build process will help. Now, of course, that comes into play on Bring a Trailer, because Bring a Trailer, there's often 100+ photos, and Bring a Trailer is just a great place to find and sell a Lincoln. But certainly for a 61 convertible, less than 3,000 made, semi-resto mod, right? Air suspension, maybe not an upgraded motor, but rebuilt motor. This has got all the components. Someone wants to turn the key, put the top down, go cruising, and that's what they get here. Now, as a bonus, I'll give you guys a quick rundown of Justin. If you look over, I'm going to make sure this is all the way turned down. Justin is Vision, Rod, and Customs. You can see it all spelled out here. And again, Justin's in the same car and truck club that I am, so I'm just doing a review on the car and what I see. Not anything personal about Justin or anything like that, but certainly this is his business page. And oftentimes if you're looking for a car and you kind of catch wind who built it, it's good to go out there and take a look at the business, and see what kind of stuff have they built. Justin has built some awesome stuff, and oftentimes his stuff is black or black with some red accents. It's kind of like his signature for things that he's been involved with and things that he's sold. But you can go out here, and there's a couple of slideshows and things like that. This also reinforces this is where the photos were taken, and they take these photos and they upload them. You can see there the top is up, the top is working. Did not see that level of detail on Barrett Jackson's site, and it could just be that they only want to have 4 or 5 photos. They want to rope you in to go there to the auction itself. But Justin certainly has built some very, very cool stuff. Here you can see the car rolling top down, driving it up to the block. And so that's some of the level of detail that I like to share here on the channel. I certainly appreciate everyone's support. If we just close it down here, it was lot 1011. So it was a 61 Lincoln Continental Convertible. It sold for just over $200,000 with the buyer fee. And someone had the money. They wanted a car that they can cruise. Maybe they knew Justin. Maybe they trust Justin. Maybe they have seen builds in the past and they know what they're getting. And I certainly think this car, although it's an elevated price for probably most people, certainly I have seen cars that are far not as in good as condition, right? Not as in good as condition, sell for sometimes even more. I think it's a pretty clean car. Again, in closing, I'd like to see just more photos if we could. I'd like to see underneath it. But that's part of the Barrett Jackson thing, the allure. They want you to really be there. You can, of course, have someone take a look at the car and you can bid over the phone, but it is what it is. Just my take on it. Now, we've got 3 more cars that we'll be covering in the channel, so I would ask that if you can come back. You basically have $231K, $275, and $100,000 north of where we just reviewed, $302,500. So make sure you subscribe, click the bell notification if you want to be notified when new videos arrive, and certainly, like I said, appreciate you guys. If you want to check out LincolnAddict.com, you can buy a shirt or sticker. I've got a few left, and appreciate the support. Stay on the rise, everyone. We out of here. Peace.